going to be important. Cool. So like I was saying, it's not just one way of working. There are multiple ways of working in a way that enables agility. So we're going to talk a little bit about what Agile is. We'll talk a little bit about different ways to work with agility. We'll also talk about how to form a team around an Agile framework and how to stand up your way of working, your team norms, your backlog. And that's all of the understanding of the work you're going to do, how to split that work up into small bursts of energy so you can get things done, review, make sure they came out the way you wanted, and then move to the next thing that creates focus. Focus is how you get done. Without focus, you kind of spin and you never get finished. So that's basically what we're going to talk about today. I am going to ask you to do something first, though, to help me understand how much information to give you. So I'm going to ask you to go to www.menti.com and enter the code you see there on the screen. Let me know if anyone has trouble getting to Menti, M like Mary, E like Edward, N like Nancy, T like Tom, I like Ingrid. www.menti.com and then enter the code 75424608.
Did everybody connect?
All right. When you're in, click the thumbs up and we'll know that everybody's on the tool. And then I'm going to ask you to answer this one question. Do you have prior Scrum or Kanban training or experience at any level? Ever heard of it? Kind of know what it is? Took a training? Okay, good. Keep going. All right, so we have a mixed audience. I'm going to deliver the entire presentation to you. That way I know you'll get everything you need. If you'd already had, as a group, a lot of Scrum and Kanban experience, I probably would have skipped a few things. Okay, so we'll go back to the presentation now and kind of keep this, if whatever tool you're using, go ahead and keep it up because we're going to revisit it. We have other questions I'll need you to answer for me. Okay, so what you see here is a mashup that explains what all this is. What is the traditional way of working? Well, it's waterfall. Has anybody heard of waterfall? If you have, raise your hand. Okay, waterfall is not a bad word. It is used appropriately for some things. I guess you're just telling me you know what waterfall is. And you can see there the history. It came out of the US Navy, became many things, and then eventually got named waterfall by Dr. Winston Royce in 1970. But it had been in play since the 1950s, just not necessarily named waterfall. Same behavior, same process. It's linear, where you do certain kinds of work start to finish before you can do the next kind of work start to finish. So maybe you do planning first. Then you do requirements only after planning is done. Then you do design only after requirements is done, and so on until you build the whole project. That's why it's called waterfall. You do it in very sequential stages. They do not overlap. You can't start the next stage until you finish the first one. Okay. It is useful when you are working on things that are very well defined. You know exactly what you've got to build because a government institute has said you need to follow these 3 laws in these 15 ways, and you know exactly what you need to do in your system to trigger that logic. you might run that waterfall. It might also have a hard and fast date. It must be done by December 15th or you'll get a fine. So you'll set that kind of work often into a waterfall method. Now, the other methods you see there started with lean, which is a way of understanding work and removing wasteful processes. Started with the Japanese and Toyota after they first visited Ford. So it actually came out of Ford, even though Toyota gets the credit for it. They watched it at Ford and then adopted it, made it more of a process and named it. And then after that came Kanban principles that came out of Lean and the Agile Manifesto, which talks about how to be nimble, how to build things in ways that customers get what they need and you get it to them faster, how to measure that work based on your customers saying yes about code that's been deployed instead of how many business requirements have been written or how many lines of code have been written. So it's a different way to understand if you're doing well. This started way back in the 1913 era with understanding lean and moving into Kanban. And then the Agile Manifesto was written in 2001. In between that, in the 1940s, you saw Kanban really take hold as Toyota found different ways to use it. This work is very adaptive. It tends to run in cycles, small iterations. You do a bit, review it. Did that work? Did customers agree? Do a bit more, review it. So it runs in cycles rather than building large pieces of the work and deploying it all at the end. The difference is if you deploy it all at the end and that's the first time the customers actually see the work, the risk is higher that you may not have hit it right on the nose. There may have been a requirement that sounded one way, but the customer meant something else, and you built something in the middle. QA tested it. Well, it's doing what the requirement said, so it's good. Customer sees it, and they're like, oh, that's not what we wanted. And you find that out at the very end. Running in cycles, the small iterations, agile ways of working, you're checking in with QA. Does it do what the requirement said? And with the customer, does it do what you need every time box? So you find problems early and you can fix them before you get all the way down the road, because some things, if they don't work, they ripple effect back and you got to fix a bunch of stuff. You want to catch it early before you've built on top of it. Does that make sense? So when you don't really know exactly where the requirements are going to be, and when you can work in time boxes instead of working to a hard and fast date, this is typically a better way to go. Both exist. Both have purpose. Okay. So let's take a look at the different way of working, the Agile way.
So the Agile Manifesto was a document written in 2001. Basically, software methodology people came together and wanted to articulate the different way of working that they had been doing compared to what the rest of the industry was doing. Really, Agile is a mindset, it's a way of thinking that's defined by 4 values, described by 12 principles, and then manifested through an unlimited number of practices or different ways of working. And it's simply a deep understanding and culture of learning and experimentation and trying things out. Any creative work will benefit from this notion of an agile way of working. One of the misconceptions about agile is sort of why, right? Why do I want to become agile? Is it just to be more efficient and more effective? And I think for some people, they may say yes, but for me, it's not that. It really is about customer centricity. Agility is the best way to serve your customer, right? The customer today is in a constant state of motion. There's a lot changing for customers at all times, and acknowledging and understanding that because I want to be more customer centric and that the customer is in a constant state of change, I need to be more flexible, agile in the way I work. And when I say I'm saying, marketing people, HR people, finance people, product development, content creators, sales, any discipline, any function that is trying to serve a customer, agile becomes a necessity, not a nice to have, because you will not be able to truly surprise and delight and fulfill the needs of your customer without having a way of working where we are co-creating and trying things out and experimenting and inspecting and adapting and innovating and being okay with failure. It is a different mindset. It is a different set of capabilities. And I think if you just boil it down to doing things differently, that's all you're going to do. You're just going to do a bunch of things differently. But if you want to be a different person that is ready for the next century of how business is done and creative work and customer centricity, that requires a journey, a learning journey for yourself. But it's a journey worth pursuing because it will change you, and it will change the way you work, and it will change what you can do for your customer.
Okay. So,
Hi, I'm Jimmy Butler, and welcome to the Agile Digest, where we have right-sized topics covered in just minutes. Now, typically, my digests are somewhere around 3 to 6 minutes.
let me
What
kill
I'm gonna do
that.
is walk you through a full-blown presentation on why doing Agile is the wrong approach. Should be about 30 minutes. Enjoy.
That's actually a backwards joke. It ends up that Agile is the right choice, but okay. So, any questions after seeing that? Sound like something you want to give a try? Yeah, okay. All right. So, what you just heard was kind of a voiceover of what you see here. This is the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto is the document I told you was written by some developers back in 1970. And they were at a ski resort. And they were talking about why software development wasn't working. So they came up with, these are the things we need to do to make it work better. So there are 4 Agile values and 12 principles that they wrote down. And it took hold. And it's what you hear people talk about when they say agility now. The values are the easiest things to remember. And they're probably the most important things to remember when you're making decisions about how you're going to work together and how you're going to work with your customers. The 4 values are individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That doesn't mean we don't care about process and tools. We do, but we care about individuals and interactions more. The same goes for number 2, working software over comprehensive documentation. Yes, you need documentation, but you need working software more because that's how you learn, by running those iterations, putting something out there that works so people can look at it, touch it, feel it, give you back some feedback. That's the experimentation part where you can figure out, are we on the right track? Should we continue? Do we need to change anything? Let's go. The third one is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Negotiation. Does anybody know what might be meant by contract negotiation here? Or?
Like making a set of rules that you're going to do instead of trying to collaborate with your customer to see what they want.
That's a good example. Or written business requirements that you kind of pull out of your customer early on. This is exactly what we need you to build, or software designs, or hardware architecture understandings or agreements. So what happens is, as you start actually building, you may need to change some of those things. You may find out you got it wrong, or you forgot something, or the customer may actually admit, you know what, I told you the wrong thing. This is what we really need. Or even, I forgot all about this thing. Without this thing, we'll have a critical problem, right? So instead of negotiating that contract to be hard and fixed, it cannot change. This is what we've agreed to. You're going to want to focus more on customer collaboration. And your customers may be customers who are using your product. They may be other developers. They may be the architecture team or the people who keep your systems up or your help desk. So your customers are all around you. And you need to make sure that you're collaborating with them. Well, yeah, you're going to have requirements and you're going to have rules and agreements. Be ready to break them, right? Because your goal is to serve the customers, not the contract. And the last one, the fourth one, is responding to change over following a plan. So that's those iterations, because in the middle of each time box, there's an opportunity to change the plan. On the old waterfall process, you couldn't change the plan. You had to go through change control process, get new approvals, and they might even tell you, you can't change the plan until after this project is delivered. Then you can stand up a new project for the change you want. That's a difference in the way this works. Now you can see there are 12 principles as well. I will not read all 12 to you because you will have this deck and you can read them, but I will read you my favorite one. It's number 10, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. So that's about removing waste, not doing things that aren't really necessary just because you've always done them that way, or because someone feels more comfortable if you have a status report every morning, but there's really no value in it because you can just tell them the status, right? So minimize excess work. That way you can save all of your energy and all of your focus for the product. Right? So take a look at the 12 values. I think you'll find, the 12 principles after the fact. I think you'll find them enlightening. And as you start standing up ways of working and giving yourself rules, if you see any of the rules or behaviors you're standing up go against these values or principles, toss them out. This is your sanity check. Because if these things are not true for you, you're not running Agile. You may be doing something else. Okay. Now, we're going to look at a couple more videos, very brief descriptions of Scrum and Kanban, and then I'm going to give you some cheat sheets and some details on how to run either. You'll have to choose which one makes sense for your team for the work you're doing. I would not advise trying to do both. Scrumban is what that's called. That is not maximizing the amount of work not done. Run one. Okay. All right. Let's get to this video. I had them all set up. Guess I killed it. So this is what happens when you try to be smart. I came up with this great new way to run my videos, and yeah, it doesn't work. So we'll do it the old way. What just happened?
Complex projects can lead to real headaches. Organizing the team, changes in scope, roles that aren't clear. But you can change that with Scrum, an agile framework. At its foundation, Scrum can be applied to any project or product development effort. Here's how it works. A product owner creates the product backlog, a prioritized wish list. During sprint planning, The team pulls a chunk from the top of that list and decides how to complete it. The team has a set time frame, the sprint, to complete their work. They meet in a daily scrum to keep the work moving forward. Along the way, the scrum master keeps the team focused. At the end of the sprint, the work should be potentially shippable. The team conducts a sprint review on the product and a retrospective on the process. Then, they choose the next chunk of the backlog and the cycle repeats. With Scrum, you can ensure the most valuable work has been completed by the time the project ends. Tackle your projects with Scrum.
Okay. So, Scrum runs in small cycles. You pick your time box and you stick to it. Your time box can be anywhere between 1 day or 4 weeks. You can decide you're going to run your sprints, a sprint a day. That's a lot. Not advisable for a new team. Or a sprint every 2 weeks. That's average. Or a sprint every 4 weeks. So 4-week sprint is how a lot of young teams start. And what I mean by young is new in the process. So pick your time box and stick to it. It's going to be important because if you don't, you can't tell how much you can get done in a sprint because you keep changing the time box. You need to know how much you can get done in a sprint so you can forecast how long it's going to take you to finish the whole thing. And you need to run at least 3 sprints so you can average them together to get that metric called velocity. So you can say, we usually kill off 30 pieces of work over a month. So we've averaged it over 3 months. We're pretty confident it's 30 pieces of work. We've got, 90 more pieces of work to do. So we got 3 more months to go. So remember, pick a time box and stick to it. So let's talk about Kanban just a little bit.
Finally, my shade looks like my skin. C3, C12. With up to 6 pages.
Now, I don't know. Could you see the entire screen?
It was only showing half.
Everyone, welcome. Welcome.
Were you able to see the entire screen? No? Don't know what happened there. Oh, something has gone wrong with this video. Okay, don't worry about it because I'll explain it anyway. So basically, what that was showing you was how Kanban is intended to work. It's a visual display of the work you're doing. That's why you see the little stickies all over the window there. Now you use some Kanban in Scrum because you do use a visual board. And we'll go through exactly what Kanban is. You can probably play the video on your own time and it'll probably play right on your screen. It may be that Zoom is taking up too much space on the computer screen and I can't get the whole screen open. So, sorry about that. My dog's barking. This is Kanban. This is Scrum. We just talked about Scrum, right? And you can see here, Scrum has values. It has some very important pillars it's based on. It has some artifacts, and it has a method. Now, remember, we talked about the Agile values, the top 4 values, right? The Scrum values are more about how you work together. The Agile values are about what you do. So the Scrum values are courage, focus, commitment, respect, and openness. The way I like to say it is, you have to have courage to work with each other openly and respectfully. And you have to have commitment so you can focus on getting the work done as a team. If when you're working together, you're not working in these ways, you reduce your ability to finish things at the end of the sprint, and you reduce the quality of your work. So you reduce the ability for you to make your customers happy, right? Now, in order to run good Scrum, you have to follow the 3 pillars that you see in the little bubbles at the bottom there. Transparency. That's more than just having your work up on a board that everybody can see. It's also making sure everybody is aware of your progress, how things are going. If you have roadblocks, if you need to team with a different team to get something done, right? So you do something in Scrum to help transparency, and that's the daily stand-up, also called the daily Scrum. Every day, you talk to each other about your work. 15 minutes, no big amount of time. What are you working on? I'm working on the X module, and I have a roadblock because my machine is down and I need another machine that I can use, or the testing environment is down and I need to know where else I can test it. Or I don't understand how to write this code. I'm going to admit it. I don't know. Can someone else help me who does? Right? Or your stand-up may sound like, hey, I just finished the X module. I'm ready to start something else. Is somebody else running behind in the sprint that I can go help? Right? So that's that teaming effect. You do it 15 minutes every day. You're checking your plan and making sure everything's going okay and getting help where it's needed. Now, inspect and adapt is what happens at the end of the sprint. You look at the code or you look at whatever you've built. You have whoever it is you're building it for look at it with you, and you inspect it. Did it turn out okay? And you adapt it if you need to. You also inspect and adapt the way you're working together by going back and looking at your Scrum values and saying, are we really following this? Are we being respectful? We may be open, but are we doing it in a way that's respectful, or are we doing it in a way that blocks people, makes them kind of shrink down or not want to come to the table with, I don't know how to do this, because they got slammed the last time they did, right? So the way you work together, you have to inspect and adapt that too. Now, the artifacts of Scrum are very simple. You have a backlog with a goal for that backlog. That's the big backlog, the product backlog. What are we going to build? What are our major goals for our customer? You also have a sprint backlog. For our time box, we'll say it's 4 weeks. We've peeled off the top part of our backlog, the most important work to do that we think we can do together in 4 weeks. And that's our sprint backlog. And we have a goal just for that little piece of work that we're going to do over the next 4 weeks. And then we also have something called a definition of done. All that is an agreement between the team on what has to happen before something can be ready to be shipped. Doesn't mean you're going to ship it, but what has to happen for it to be shippable? Does the code have to be peer reviewed? Does it have to be checked into a certain place? Are there certain quality standards that have to have been met? Is there a customer review that has to happen? And then you do that over and over every time box, we'll say 4 weeks. And while you're sprinting, you're doing your daily stand-up. So you see your 4-week sprint, you're working on your backlog, just the sprint backlog, not the whole backlog. You're doing your daily stand-up, also known as the daily scrum. You're checking on each other, making sure everything's going okay, answering questions, things like that. Just 15 minutes. If it's more than 15 minutes, you're doing something else. Okay. Then you review the work at the end of the 4 weeks. Review it with someone who can answer for the customer or someone who is the customer. And then at the very end of the 4 weeks, spend a little time together on a retrospective. And that's when you're going to check back on the way you're working together. What do we need to improve? What do we need to inspect and adapt? Maybe about our definition of done. Are we missing something out of it? Maybe we need to talk about how we're working on our commitments. Are we overcommitting, saying we can do more than we can, so then we can't get done at the end of the sprint, right? That takes our focus off. We're trying to work on too many different things. Basically, that's Scrum. There is a cheat sheet. You see this cheat sheet up at the top that you can click on and learn more. So let's talk about the Kanban method. I'm sorry the video didn't work out. Who worked on my other machine. So, Kanban. Kanban is a pull system method. It does not require new roles or new training or special agreements. It does require that you understand what the work is. So you write little tickets for your work, use the same structure for each ticket, make sure there's enough information, just enough for everybody to know what that ticket means. And you put them into a visual board. So you start with what you know and you build on it. So you'll be adding tickets. Start with what you know. You get an agreement on what those ticket means. You do a little Kanban session with your team, look at the board, make sure everybody understands what's on it. And then you encourage acts of leadership. You're all leaders in this story. You pick out work and say, I can take this one. I know how to do this one. Someone else will pick a different ticket. Once you start working, you move that ticket from the column on the left, which is all of your to-dos, to the column in the middle that's in progress. That is a commitment. I have moved this ticket to in progress. I'm committing to getting it done. Doesn't mean you can't go get help, or you can even team on a ticket, but you're committing. So because it's visual, your customers can see, oh, this work is in flight, right? And you have to make some explicit policies to determine when it can move to the next column. So it's in progress. What does it take to get it out of in progress to done? What are the rules that you have to have met in order to say this is done? Very similar to the definition of done, right? Now you may add columns. You may decide you want a column for in progress, a column for review, a column for testing, a column for done. To move to the next column, you always have to have a list of rules to say, okay, this can move. These things are done. That's your explicit policies. You also need to limit the amount of work that's in each column, because if everything stacks up in the testing column, what's going to happen to the person who's testing? Right? they're going to lose focus. They're going to get frustrated. It's not going to get done. So you set limits. Maybe you say in the in progress column, we can only have 4 cards. In the test column, we can't move anything into that test column when there's more than 3 cards in it. We have to wait. Don't overload the person, right? So you set limits on how much can be in each column. And that's based on how many team members you have. Your first sets of limits will probably change because you're going to have to guess in the beginning. The goal is to create a process that doesn't bottleneck, that flows smoothly. That's what those limits are for. That's managing your flow. You also measure the amount of time it takes to go from one column to the next column. That's your cycle time and lead time. So lead time is how long it takes for things to come out of your to-do and get into in progress. Cycle time is how long it takes to get all the way through the end of the process. When you know those numbers, you can give average estimates to your customers about how long it's going to take for something to do. But of course, you have to run cards through the column, for a few cycles so you can average it and be honest. Okay. Notice there's no sprint. There's no sprint review. There's no retrospective. There's no daily stand-up. This is a simpler process. It works better for things that are very repeatable, help desk tickets, or system configuration where you're doing a config for the same part of the system for different customers and you customize it a little bit each time. That kind of work is great for Kanban. Process work, you're building new rules or regulations. You're standing up manual back-end processes and you need to work out the agreements for what those are going to be. Great for Kanban. Scrum, because it forces you to stop and review the work with your customer every sprint, is better when you're designing something. Does that make sense? So you have to decide what kind of work are you doing? Does Scrum fit or does Kanban fit? Now, there's a Kickstart board down here. So there's an example of a Kanban board. And those work in process and the metrics I talked about, and a glossary that you can click the links to and figure out what you want to do. Okay. Any ideas yet of what you might think might be good for your team, Scrum or Kanban?
I mean, you said Scrum, like the concept of Scrum is that you do these sprints, and then once you finish a sprint, then you work with your customer and you show them what you have at those different points, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like, at least for our concept, I felt like Scrum would be really useful in some instances where we're basically developing this whole new program with this whole new website and all these new concepts. So I feel like it would be really beneficial to be able to do those sprints and check with our customers, see if everything's working how we feel like it should be, and not just moving on too fast without that.
You're on mute.
Oh, I was saying that I agree. Yeah. Since we're designing something, and you were mentioning that designing something is somewhat with Scrum, then
Yeah.
I think we should do that.
Yep. So Scrum it is then. All right. These are the major differences between Scrum and Kanban. This came from Forbes, an article in Forbes. And at the bottom, I've given you some links to where you can go and get an hour-long training course or take a look at the Scrum guide. There's an actual guide written for how to run Scrum. It's only, I think, 13 pages long. You can read it in less than an hour. You also have the Scrum cheat sheet that I gave you can click on. Or you can watch one of the video courses on LinkedIn. I don't know if you're LinkedIn users. LinkedIn Learning has a great Scrum course for 1 hour. And you can learn exactly how to run Scrum as a team. I do suggest if you do the course, do it as a team. Pick a time to do it together. Do you have tools already? Do you know what tools you're going to use for your collaboration? No? Okay. So both processes use a visual board. You're going to need a board. The board can be physical. It can be a glass wall. It can be a whiteboard. It can be a painted wall if you use that blue tape that doesn't destroy paint. And you're going to need to be able to set up that Kanban board I showed you. You use the same Kanban board in Scrum. It's just that Scrum has a bigger process wrapped around it. So you'll need to set up a Kanban board. That is your transparency, your visual board. People can see the work. The team can see the work. If your customers are local, they can see the work. Or you can use a digital board. There are tons of digital boards out there. I don't know, Trello used to have one that you could stand up for free with basic functionality. But take a look at visual Kanban boards, and you can see some listed here. And you can also see some software for Scrum. It might be a little heavy, might be a little expensive, but I'm thinking Trello might be the best bet because it can be used for either. But there are probably more that I don't even know about anymore. There are more coming out basically daily. This is so popular. Okay, so you got some links there to take some training. You can go read the Scrum Guide, which I highly recommend. It will play for you on audio, or you can read it as a PDF. It's up to you. And you need to figure out how you're going to do your visual board. Okay. Now, I'm glad you picked Scrum because I think it's the right thing for you. I want you to remember something. Scrum doesn't work if you don't collaborate well. It doesn't. If your preference is to go off and do your own work by yourself and bring it back to the team when you're done, you're not going to be able to run Scrum well. You need to talk to each other every day to run Scrum well. You need to talk to your customers multiple times in the sprint if you can. And if you can't, at least at the end of the sprint. You've got to be willing to talk to people. You have to collaborate, right? Kanban, you can kind of not collaborate. It won't do well, but it won't kill the whole thing. Scrum, if you will not collaborate, you're never going to run Scrum. Not really. You may say you are, you may do some of the Scrum events, but you're not really running Scrum if you're not collaborating, right? Face-to-face is best. That includes Zoom, right? So emails and texts, not so good. Face-to-face, where you can literally talk to each other, is the best way. So be yourself. Don't try to be all things, but do collaborate. Be open. It takes courage to do that sometimes, especially when you have to talk about something that didn't go well, right? So remember these 4 things. You don't have to change who you are. Be as much of who you are as you can. That's best. You can't be everything everybody wants you to be. It's not necessary. You can't be anything you want to be, but you can learn to be the best that you are, right? You cannot learn every coding language known to man, but you can be the best C++ coder in the world, right? And instead of focusing heavily on what one team member doesn't do well, or one person's communication behavior is kind of not comfortable, or stop looking for what's not right with each other and focus heavily on the great things about each other. Everybody's got something great about them. Focus on that. That'll bring you together as a team, and then share your skills. That will make you a superpower team. Okay? Teaming is not easy. If you focus on teaming, you will win. These are the roles that you see in Scrum and Kanban, and kind of an explanation of the key activities. Scrum usually has a Scrum Master. We call that an Agile practitioner now, or an Agile leader. Whoever read the Scrum Guide and got it, really understands it, really loves it, they should stand up and say, I will be your Scrum Master for at least a cycle or two. You can rotate the hat if you want to, but not in the middle of a sprint, right? That person then becomes responsible for helping everyone on the team understand Scrum. They also become responsible for helping other teams that you're engaging with understand Scrum, and even your customers and your leadership understand Scrum. So you become the Scrum evangelist, okay? You can see some key activities there for a product owner. A product owner is a person who's responsible for making sure you're getting good information about what the customer wants. That person becomes your liaison between the team and the customer. They become the voice of the customer. So they spend a little extra time pulling in information for the team so everybody else can focus on the work. Now, the product owner can also be a person who's doing the work, but they have kind of split time. And then the development team, that's everybody who's hands on keyboards. That includes people who are testers, who do UI design, who help deploy the code, who maintain the system after it's deployed, at least for a maintenance period to make sure everything's okay. Sometimes maintenance periods may be a month or 2 months, right? So when we say development team, we're talking about all of those skills. And we like to make it so that everyone can do a little bit of all of it. It doesn't usually start out that way. But if you're partnering and helping each other, a developer will learn some testing principles. A tester may learn how to do some low-level coding. A developer may learn how to build test data to help the tester out. So you share, you work together. You don't silo and say, I only do development and I only do testing. That's waterfall. Okay, is this making sense? Okay, don't worry about taking notes or trying to remember any of this. I'm going to share it all with you, right? So it's more about taking in the information and doing a little sense making in your own head. Imagine how you could see yourself doing these things. Okay, you guys ready to try to understand what your backlog might look like? You want to do an exercise? Okay, I'm going to need you to go back to the Mentimeter. And we're going to spend just a little time together on your backlog. Anybody have any trouble getting into Mentimeter? You go to www.menti.com and enter code 75424608. Now, once everybody's in, I see 7. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Don't overthink it. Just answer with your first thoughts. Who is your customer or your customers? Okay, that's a good answer. What kind of person is using your product? Is your customer, oh, high school students. Good. Okay, possibly college students. All right. Is your customer located in a certain place? Are they global? Are they only in the US? Okay. Mostly US, okay. Are they, do they have any special needs? Are there any customers who might be hearing impaired or who might be mobility impaired or who might need special keyboards, anything like that. Okay, you ready to move on? Possibly colorblind or visually impaired. That's a good one. So you might need a little UI usability, right? Okay. What problem are you solving for your customer? Why do they need your product? My customer needs my product because what? Come on, somebody. Are you guys typing or thinking? Okay. Okay. Any other reason they need your product? Is this something new and novel that nobody's ever seen before, or are there competitors that cost too much money? You're going to provide something better, or cheaper, or faster, or makes it easier for the customer. But easier for the customer to do what? What's the problem? Ah, okay. Good. So the problem you're trying to solve is they need a better way to understand the college selection process. Yes? All right, good. As a team, the work you're going to do together, not how you're going to work, the actual work you're going to do as a team. What are your biggest goals? What are like the big three things you want to make sure this product does, and what you're going to have to do to make that happen? Oh, good. Scores an environment, construct and provide a user-friendly site, assistance with college applications, and exposure to the job market. Okay. Anybody else want to throw something up before me? Okay, the biggest goals: collaborate collectively, develop a functional website with satisfaction for everyone who uses it. Okay, customer satisfaction. All right. And reveal options. Great. Okay, I'm going to leave this accessible to you so you can continue adding to it as a team. So you're going to have this board for 2 weeks. All right. So if you were thinking systemically, the actual physical build, can you name at least one or maybe two actual system things that you have to build or enable? And it's okay if you can't, but if you can think of some things, what are you going to go and sit down and physically try to build in your first sprint? What do you think? Or maybe something that you know you're going to have to build across multiple sprints in pieces. What would those pieces be? Front end of the website. Yep. The vision itself. We're going to talk about that shortly. Anything else? So the front end of the website. What if you were to try to sign up process? Good. So if you try to break that down, what are 3 things that you think of when you think of the front end of the website? Sign up. What else? Marketing, delivery. What else? Now you're in the system, you're building the system physically. What else do you need in the front end of the website? A form, data form. Okay. An ability to store information. Good. Keep thinking, and you need to think that way. What are the big rocks? Development of the website and its parents, front end and back end. Yes. Will need to coincide with each other. Sometimes you can build the back end as a second big rock. If you can get enough into the front end where the customer gets value out of it, and you can run manual processes on the back end, so you can get it out to the market, then you can build your back end kind of parallel overlapping, but not necessarily exactly at the same time. All right. What positive outcome or impact will you provide to your customer? Think about it this way. What do you want the customer to say about how great your product was? What do you want them to say was great about it? I know what to do and I know where to go. Oh, easing the stress of the college selection process. I remember too well. One stop for all aspects of college application process. These are great outcomes. You have 2 outcomes, really 3. I know what to do now. I know where to go now. And I have a one-stop place for the entire application process. You also have impact. So you have outcome and you have impact. Impact is you ease the stress that I was having. That's an impact, right? You help me connect to a job that I enjoy. That's an impact. And now I have information on funding resources. That's an outcome, right? So now you have outcomes and impacts. Outcomes is what did I give you? Impacts is why did it matter? Okay. What do you want to make sure does not happen to your customer? Good. Trouble moving around the site. Usability issues. Anything else? You're sharing a lot of information with your customer. What do you want to make sure doesn't happen to them? Yeah, very good. You don't want them to be confused. I'll give you a tip too. You want that information to be correct. You don't want them to be misled. right? So someone type in there, I don't want my customers to be misled. Now you have 3 things you want to make sure you're checking for as you think, as you build, right? You can also have in your definition of done, ease of use has been verified by a UI expert. The data we're sharing has been double checked. We know it's accurate, right? And our usability testing shows that people feel it's easy to find things. You might want to add something to your definition of done to say that colorblind checks have been done to make sure the color palette is something anyone can see, everyone can see. Some people can't see the color red. Right. Data security, yes, you want their data not to be compromised. Okay, good. All right, I think we know the answer to this, but go ahead and put in your answers. Which do you think is best for the work you're going to do? It's also a chance, because it's anonymous and no one can tell who's answering, for someone to disagree. It's looking pretty much like a quorum. Okay. All right. So now you know a lot more about the work you're going to do. We're going to take a quick look at how to put this together. And then I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Yay. Okay. All right. So we just kind of answered most of the questions that you see up on this slide. We need to identify some deliverables. You kind of did that too. Those deliverables we talked about were big things, like the front end, an intake or a sign-on process, a data form, a way to store your data. We call those epics, because you can't typically build that whole thing in one sprint, right? So you have at least 3 epics up in the information that you put into Mentimeter. The first 3 that come to mind that I remember are your intake process, or the form for people to put data in, your login process, and your UI navigation, how to move around on at least a landing page where you get to log in and you get to that data form. Those are 3 big epics, right? And you have more, but you have at least those 3. Now, we also talked about vision. What is your product vision? What do you think about when you talk about your product, right? And you put some words into the Mentimeter about the outcomes and impacts that you want for your customer. That's really talking about your product vision, right? So if we were to pop those words in here, we would have had things like one-stop shop, right? What are other words that we had? Someone tell me. One-stop shop for college selection with everything you need. In one place. So you want to try to create a vision that you can say so simply that you can always remember it. You want to keep your product vision 1 or 2 sentences. 1 is even better, right? So we'll use this one just for today's session, but I want you to go into this deck, homework, as a team and update it, change it, make it yours. Right? And then you'll have your epics, right? And we talked about the fact that one of your epics was the landing page. So when I enter mentimeter.com, it takes me to a landing page. It's very simple, and that's where I log in, right? And then you need a login process. And then you need a data form. And then you need data storage. And other things, backend process. Probably some pages between the data form and the login, right? So you'd land on the landing page, you log in, maybe you get a little information or a shared understanding of what I'm here to do and how I'm going to do it and what the outcome is going to be. And then they pop up a data form and start filling out data, right? So there could be plenty of more epics that you would add to this. This should be several pages, not just one. But here's the way Scrum works. Start with just this one, right? And you're going to add more as you go. You don't have to build out the entire requirement set before you can start work. That's waterfall, right? So your homework assignment is to true up your vision statement. And then your epics, at least your first few, make sure the team agrees on what those are. Those are going to be the first things you try to go do. Write a very brief description of the epics. If it's more than can fit in this space, it's too much. Brief description of the epic, just enough for the team to understand what you mean by the title, what you mean by landing page. Okay. Then you're going to do some work to create a backlog, but you're not going to try to create the whole backlog. Just your first few initial stories to get going so you can start sprinting. You have to have some stories to sprint. A story is just a way to understand a small piece of work that you can get done in 2 to 3 days to serve one of these epics. The team has to decide which epics are most important to start on right now. So you'll prioritize them. And then you'll write stories for the top priority epics. The stories are very simple. You need your product vision, which you have. You need your product goals. And we talked about what your major goals would be for your product. It's in your Mentimeter, right? And you can add to them and change them, of course. And then you have to decide how much functionality you want to roll out with for your first release. Do you need the back end for the first release? Maybe not. Maybe you can go with something manual. Do you need the data storage for your first release? Probably. But you have to decide how much data do you need to be able to store for your first release. Right? So decide what your minimum viable product is, the minimal amount of functionality that will serve your customer well and get you started down the road, just like they did with the whole iPhone scenario. Started out just a little music player. That's all it was. Then it was a phone with just a little functionality. That's all it was. Then it had a great camera. Then it had more apps than you'll ever use in your entire life. So they didn't just go straight for the more apps than you'll ever use in your entire life. They released minimum viable functionality and then built on top of it. That's the idea here. So identify for yourself what your number one epics will be that you need to deploy as quickly as possible. Focus on those and write stories for them. Typical story card format is, as a user, whatever type of user I am, I need the ability to do something in the system so that I can get this particular outcome. So I made up a story here, and it's for a music search, if you were building a streaming music app. So as a streaming music customer, I need the ability to search for music by genre and time period so that I can see lists of my favorite types of music. The so that I can is important. If you stop with I need to be able to search for music, you don't know why they're doing the thing they're doing or what they hope it will result in. So by adding the so that I can, I know now I need to display that back in lists that they can favorite, not just that they need to search, right? So it's always as a user, and you name the type of user, because different types of users, they have different security profiles or different access levels. So as a certain kind of user, I need the ability to do whatever it is so that I can, what's the next step? Why do they need to do this? So that I can, okay? If you have a user story that you're going to hand to a developer, they need to understand, how do I know when this work is done? So unlike the definition of done, that's your quality check at the end, each story has its own acceptance criteria. So in this story, the acceptance criteria is the ability to select a genre and enter a formatted date range. And search with 2 clicks. You want to be able to do it easy, right? Don't make me do a bunch of stuff. The search return is fast. So I said 5 seconds if there's low traffic. That might actually be slow now. And if there's high traffic, give them a range. 10 seconds if it's high traffic. These are acceptance criteria. This is the way I can say, we built this well, customer will like it. And then a fourth one is the data is returned in a way that is selectable so that I can click on it, right? And it has an image associated with it so I can understand it graphically, not just with words. And then there are 2 more acceptance criteria saying that each song can be played and that you can select them to group into a playlist. But I'm saying that's probably more than what this story asked for. So maybe I need to write a second story for that acceptance criteria. So your stories may start really, really chunky, big, right? And then the team has to work together to splice them down to, I can build this in 2 days. So let's split this story in half, right? Your acceptance criteria is a good way to understand that you probably should split the story. You have more than 3 or 4 acceptance criteria, you probably have more than 1 story. Okay. So that was a lot to take in. Do you have any questions? No? Everybody good?
One thing I was wondering, just with Scrum as a whole, is there usually a upper bound on how many sprints you'd have per project, or does it really just depend on the type of project you're doing?
No, you sprint until you're done. Now, you may do what we call trimming the tail. You may find that you're adding more and more functionality that your user hasn't asked for and that you don't really need. So you review your backlog and decide, is it time? Are we done? Is this enough? But there's no rule for how long you sprint. You sprint until you've delivered your MVP, and then you continue sprinting to add more value for your customer until you realize you're probably spending more time and money than it's worth it because your customer's not using a lot of the stuff that you're starting to put out, or they never even asked for it in the first place, right? Now, unlike the iPhone, they keep adding more apps that nobody uses, but you have to decide. And who do you think helps you make that decision? Who do you think that might be
Customer.
on this list of
Oh.
team members that kind of helps you make that decision?
Product owner.
Yeah, the product owner. Because the product owner is in direct communication with your customer, your sponsor, whoever's paying for this, right? And they may come back and say, guys, these are some great ideas, but we have no customer support or need. There's no demand for it. And budget's running low. We're done. Right. Everybody trying to make that decision will just create a lot of confusion. You want most of your people able to just focus in on their committed work and get that work done sprint to sprint. That's why you have a product owner that's kind of running interference for you with the customers, and you have a Scrum evangelist that's helping everybody understand Scrum, so everybody else can just focus on the work. Okay, so this is what the board will look like. You remember you have a cheat sheet for setting up a board, but it's real simple. You have all of your stories loaded into one column. That column should be really fat and really long because it's going to have a bunch of story cards. And then you have a few that you pull over into to do. Those are your top priority. You're looking at your backlog, you're prioritizing them, moving the cards around and saying, these are the most important things right now. And you move those most important things into to do. Don't move more into to do than you can do in your time box. Don't put 6 months worth of to do in to do if you're only running a 4-week sprint, right? And then as you work together in your sprint planning, you commit to what's in to do. You say, okay, we've talked through these cards. We've done our sprint planning. We're about to sprint. We spent, the day before the sprint deciding what's going to go into do. We've talked about who's going to do each card. We talked amongst each other and made sure we understand what's in each card, and we think we can get it done in 4 weeks, right? And at that point, when you start the sprint, what's in to do is committed. You have committed to getting that done. Do not overcommit. Don't force yourself to fail. Commit to what you really believe you can get done. And then as you do it, move the cards through the process. That's your transparency. When it's in progress, people don't have to ask you, well, how's it going? Or can you give us a status report? It's right there on the board. It's in progress, right? Or it's moved in testing. And we're following our definition of done. We know what we have to complete in order to be done. We're also meeting all of our acceptance criteria inside of each little story card. Okay, so there's a list here of steps to go through to work your board and to run a sprint. And you can see who does what. Most of it is the team, right? Now and then is just the product owner. The Scrum Master or the Scrum Evangelist can be a developer on the team, or they can be someone who is not actually a developer on the team. That's usually best if you can afford to have a person whose job it is to keep everybody understanding Scrum. They can help you with the Scrum board and all of those things. A lot of times teams can't afford that, and you share the hat. A developer is Scrum Master for one sprint, a different one is for the next sprint. That's not the best way to do it, but it is a way to do it. You have to do what works. Okay. All right. Now, we're right at time. I asked for an extra 30 minutes so I could take you through the exercise. I do want you to go back to Mentimeter one last time and see the rest of your homework. I also want you to answer this question real quick for me. Oh, yay. That makes me feel good. Thank you. Ooh. Got 8. Or how many people are on the call? Is it 8? Okay.
8 plus you.
8 plus me. Okay. All right. In just 1 to 3 words, very brief statements. What did you like most about today's session? And you can make 1 submission or up to 3. Nice. Who thinks they could help the team through the content of what we just did? Is there a budding Scrum Master in the room? Raise your hand if you think you could be the one. Or you guys can have that conversation offline. Right? The first person who gives it a try, they are the courageous one. You have to make sure you give them grace and help them through it. Right? That person should read the Scrum guide and take the Scrum course. Everybody really should. Okay. What do you think you still need to learn about most? You can pick up to 3 things. And we can talk about later how you get that learning. There may be things I can send you or things that Johnny and I can help you with. Yep, those are the ones that I usually see the most too. Yep. Glad you feel like you need to learn about your product, because you do. Yep. Okay, now I'm going to change the setting on this Mentimeter so that you can move through it at your own pace whenever you want to. I'm also going to output the results and send them to you with the deck. Actually, I'll send them to Johnny and he'll get them to you. Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you for staying a little late. Thank you for your engagement and my very best wishes for your work as a Scrum team.
Thank you so much, Miss Wilson.
You're welcome. All right. Johnny, you have anything or you want to close the call out?
Well, I'll let Pranav, our president, close things out. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know the whole team, I mean, the whole group, I was calling them the team again. The whole organization is very grateful for you doing this. Pranav, you want to close us out and let everyone head back to sleep?
Yeah, sure. I just want to say, like, the whole Scrum thing, I know actually before your presentation, I thought I'd just take a look and see what it's all about. And I was honestly really scared. I'm like, oh my goodness, this just feels so convoluted and there's so much that goes into it. But just thank you so much for your presentation. I feel like you showed us that it actually makes things so much more simpler, I feel like, to be able to compartmentalize like that. And it just sounds so efficient. And I just feel so happy now because I feel like it's something we can do and something that can really get our project going. So thank you so
Good.
much for that. I know I really appreciated it. And like Mr. Johnny said, I know everybody else in this meeting really appreciated it as well. And I honestly can't wait to start using this for our project.
Terrific. Sometimes the trainings and the courses and the videos and all that, it does seem like a lot, but if you really focus on the core elements of it, it's really simple.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, just thank you everybody, especially Ms. Wilson, for attending tonight. It was great seeing y'all here, and I can't wait to get started on this in the next coming weeks, guys. Thank you, everybody.
All right. You have a
All
good
right.
evening.
Thanks again. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.